And it was a really, really pleasant day. As it happened,
that would be a fantastic time where one of the things we wanted to do today was kind of highlight Peter and, just I think that Peter Leatham is just the heart and soul of everything Accrington Stanley. And, of course, he's the chairman of the Supporters Trust. We get in trouble with it because it's no longer the Supporters Club. It's the official Accrington Stanley Supporters Trust. And the things that Peter does on a day-to-day basis, I mean, he will be, in the shop selling shirts one day. The next day he'll be shipping out the North American Supporters Club pins to me, greeting you or Tony or the gentleman from France that we had on the show the other day that, come and visit on match day. So tell us a little bit about, your experience, and Tony could probably jump in here, but, what does Peter do when fans come and visit the match, and tell us a little bit about everything that you've seen him do over at Stanley.
Well, I've known Peter. I've had the pleasure of knowing Peter for about 9 or 10 years now. It's a privilege to call him my friend. He's a great guy, lovely guy. We used to work in an environment together, and then we forged a friendship from that. I told him I was coming on the show, and I sort of said, look, because he's a modest guy, I said, look, tell me a little bit about what you've done. And it was like trying to get blood out of a stone because he doesn't want to blow his own trumpet. But he was telling me how when he came in as the Supporters Club chairman, I know it's now a trust, as you say, when he looks at his role, he reflects on his role, what he did with the supporters is not totally dissimilar to what Andy did with the actual club. It needed a bit of organisation, it needed some structure and a bit of focus. And Peter, who himself was, very successful in business, he was able to bring that into the Supporters Club, which now we call the Trust. And he wanted me, before I sort of went off and started saying such great things about him, that it was always going to be a team effort. And there's a couple of guys who warrant a mention in dispatches here. Chap called Ken Jefferson,
yes,
who used to look after the running of the away travel, and he did a brilliant job. And that baton has now been handed to a chap called Adam Scarborough at the start of this season, and he's maintaining the standards that Ken had set. And then on the financial side, there's a guy called Jim, I think it's Toy. Again, a great asset, and he's handed the reins over to a younger protege in the shape of a chap called Josh Adcroft. And then finally, a chap called Peter Warburton, who has been working on he's the membership secretary for the Trust. And you've now got nearly 700 paid-up members, which is, great when you look at the Accrington fan base. And they're always liaising with the ultras and a chap called Jason Graham, trying to make the match day experience and the ground so vibrant, to bring it to life. And as you've already mentioned, Phil, you've got the shop in the town, which provides an excellent link between the club and the community. And they're selling things directly from the club, but also they've got official club merchandise, but non-official merchandise, which is memorabilia, what have you. And also they sell some of Andy's WHAM products.
Yes.
That works really well under the one roof.
Yeah, you can go buy your shirts and your books and your mugs and buy a box from produced by WHAM, and you have everybody's happy,
But in terms of, I think the achievements that Peter's sort of presided over, you've got that great fan zone now at the ground, and I believe they donated, they raised £25,000 towards that. You've got they got the electronic screen within the stadium, and that was crowdfunded by the Supporters Club, the Uplights crowdfunding scheme. They've got TV screens in the fan zone. They've contributed money for the pitch covers to look after the ground. As you will be aware, there was a publication after the League Two Championship season, Pride and Passion. Peter produced that. You mentioned
it's an amazing book. I have it sitting right here on my desk.
And
I've got one here as well, Phil.
And just to jump in on that, what you said is absolutely 100% bang on, David. I can't really add too much to it. other than some of the things that he does in getting these projects off the ground. He has that ability to talk to people or work with people to donate. And I think it would be a good time just to sort of mention some of the book you mentioned, Pride and Passion, and the Memorial Gardens, which is the project that's underway right now. He's able to get donations from many people, but there's an individual, a gentleman by the name of David Davis, that has contributed very, very handsomely to both projects, and that's has a lot to do with Peter and the relationship that he has with the fans.
Is being partly funded at the moment in these times of COVID-19. They're having the virtual 50-50 draw on Saturday afternoons. And I know that's raised a few £100 already, where people effectively buy a raffle ticket, and it's all live on stream or FaceTime, and I think Peter does it, and that's working well.
Yeah, that's actually the very next thing I was going to mention is the 50-50 draws, and you go in, it's just £1 per ticket. You just go in there. I'll put out another link on Twitter and on Facebook. You just go in, you can buy anywhere between 1 and 10 tickets, and I think last week the winning ticket was worth over £650, so definitely worth getting into, even if you're not an Accrington fan. You can win some quid and support a good cause at the same time.
That's the ingenuity as well. It's just thinking outside of the box, and it's great, and it works well.
I gotta say too, because when Peter's doing some of the fundraising, and there might be he's like, for example, selling bricks in the wall of the Memorial Gardens, and they sell a brick for £10. And I'll tell Peter, I'll email him, message him saying, listen, I'm in, put me down. And it's always, it's fun in September when I go to my first match. When I go back, I seek Peter out because I owe him some money every September when I get there. but he said, no, I'll put it in for you. Pay me when you see me. And, that's just it for me, coming from Canada to back to Accrington. When I'm able to do something like that, it just means a heck of a lot.
It's just that trust and that respect that sort of oozes from everything that he does. He's just a gentleman. And I know one thing that he does, which is a personal thing. He has an apartment in Turkey. And I believe that at the annual dinner, that Turkish apartment is up for grabs for a holiday, which benefits the club. And Peter is more than happy to let an Accrington Stanley fan go and experience a Turkish delight on him, as it were. So it's a measure of the man. And of course, he looks after the social media accounts. And he's just a great guy.
Tournament. He does a big golf tournament every year also. That's a big fundraiser for the club. And, we could probably do a whole 3-part episode just talking about everything that Peter does. I tell you, I mean, he... like you said, I mean, going back to what you were saying about Andy Holt, I remember one of the stories that Andy was telling was that when he first took over the club, it was a full 12 to 18 months before they just stopped getting collection calls. He would say, just when they thought everything had been paid for, he would get a phone call about, some plumbing bill from 6 years ago, and he said he went through that for a whole about 12 to 18 months, and from what I understand, when Peter took over what was the Supporters Club, now the Supporters Trust, that he had kind of that same thing, and then just to turn it into something that has produced so much. And like you said, Tony, he's a guy where, I'll say, oh, hey, I want this and this and this and this. And, he'll just send it to me, and then I'll PayPal, and whatever I owe, I'll square up with him. and it's just, and every time he sends me, every time I order some, I'll get a little extra something in the box, be it, a couple game programs or whatnot. He really knows how to make a person feel like they're appreciated as being a supporter. And like you said, with over 700 paid memberships now, I think that was maybe 200 when he took over. So it's just incredible.
Well, he's a great ambassador, and he welcomes fans from other clubs and on the match days. And not only does he work tirelessly for Stanley, I know that when Blackpool were having all manner of problems with their owners, and they were desperate to rid themselves, because the owners of Blackpool not so long ago were the polar opposite of your Andy Holtz of this world.
Yeah.
He was liaising with their supporters and producing the football badges, the match badges. And so he looks at it in the greater scheme of things and helping football clubs who are going through hard times. He's seen it at Accrington, and he's just a guy who helps people who need help, and he's got the experience to do it and do it well. And also, sorry, just to add, there was that tragedy at the WHAM where the Rotherham United fan collapsed and died at the stadium.
Right.
And
right. That was
awful, wasn't it?
Yeah.
But he organised a collection there for the Rotherham fan, and it's just a measure of the man and the humanitarian elements that both he and Andy bring to the club, and they couldn't wish for two finer people at the helm.
And they've come together at the right time too, with Andy coming in the club and Peter taking over. It's just the timing for both of these individuals, on the supporter side and the club side to come together. And as a result, you've got the product we got today.
And more to speak to what you were talking about the, I actually have one of those Blackpool pins here. It was actually the very first things that I ever ordered from Stanley, just because I saw that and thought it was such an incredible gesture that they were doing that for a rival club. And, the way that Andy reached out to Barry supporters this year and said, hey, come over and catch a Stanley match. And, it's just, like you said, I mean, anything that happens, whether it's, with Stanley or it's another team around, it's just that sense of family and community that, like you said, a Rotherham supporter came to the stadium and unfortunately passed away. And it was really, it was like, somebody from the town had passed, because it just for weeks, it wasn't just, kind of, one little gesture of, let's acknowledge that this happened. It was for weeks. Donations were taken and things were done all around Accrington to show that solidarity. And that's just, it's something that's so uncommon for, an organization to just reach out to their rivals and say, hey, we're all in this together.
I had a list of things that I was going to talk about, Peter, and David so eloquently, better than I could, what ticked all the boxes. So well done, David. Thank you.
I find that hard to believe.
Now might be a good time to do what's Tony and a lot of folks' favorite part of the show. Are you ready, Tony?
Yep.
All right, so I'm gonna put in the sound effect. And David, so we, or Tony actually came up with what's become our most popular segment. It's called Rapid Fire, and I don't know if you've heard this before, but we just ask you some quick questions where you tell us, one or the other type questions, and have a little bit of fun with this. So I'm going to turn the mic over to Tony, and here we go with Rapid Fire.
Thanks.
Interrogating music.
No, thanks, Phil. I think when he says everybody's favorite, it's my favorite part of the show. But anyway, I think people have a bit of fun with it. So it's just meant for just to sort of just a lot of fun. And here we go. Okay, first one up. Music question: Beatles or Rolling Stones?
Beatles.
Mushy peas or garden peas?
Garden peas every time.
Oh. Sorry about the sigh there. I'm a mushy pea man myself. Okay, red or brown sauce on your bacon butty?
What do you think? It's got to be brown, hasn't it?
Oh, absolutely, 100%. With your full English, would you have black pudding or without?
With black pudding.
Good man. Yes, exactly. For soap opera, would you watch Coronation Street or EastEnders?
Oh God, that's a choice of nothingness, isn't it? Can I say neither?
You can.
I have done. No, I wouldn't watch either. Horrible.
Okay, would you watch on Netflix? Would you watch Sunderland Till I Die?
Yes.
Okay, and if you were to binge watch a show, what would you recommend?
There's two which have come up recently. One would be Bosch on Amazon Prime, and the other one would be New Amsterdam, which is available on Amazon, but I think it was made by NBC in the States. They have made lockdown more and more palatable. They're brilliant shows.
Good. It's nice to get other people, because sometimes you say the same programs. Nice to get something new. And this is one for out of a Liverpool side of the question. This was from Mark Hughes. Red or white wine?
I don't drink either, but again, I'd have to go for white.
Okay. And now, Phil, you have some that you'd like to throw in.
Yeah, we have a few that we brought from this side of the pond. And now Tony is originally from Accrington and visits there every year, which we're going to talk about in our next segment. He is from Canada now, where they have a signature dish called poutine, which is a delicacy of chips, gravy, and cheese curds. Is this something you'd be interested in trying?
It was going well with the chips and the gravy. What is it, cheese curds?
Well,
it's like a lump of cheese.
Oh, yeah, that's more than palatable. Bring that one on, absolutely.
Oh, yeah, you see, you get your nice hot chips. You put your little cubes of cheese on it where they melt. Top it off with gravy. And then, you have that, and boy, oh boy, does your heart slow down.
Sounds exquisite. Put me on the menu. Absolutely, have that one.
Yeah, you got to wash that one down with a couple pints.
A couple pints of Ackee ale.
Yeah, there we go. And then over here in Phoenix, Arizona, which is where I'm at, we like hot and spicy foods. We put jalapeno peppers on our pizza. Would you enjoy trying a pizza with jalapeno peppers?
Yes. Pepperoni with jalapeno. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Yes, pepperoni and jalapeno. That is the pizza of choice. Very, very good answer. Much better than mushy peas.
Oh yeah. I mean, mushy peas, they have a wind factor, don't they? You can turn the central heating off. You can heat your house with mushy peas overdraft. It's not wired up. You can get your own electricity supply going with mushy peas.
Yeah, at least power your cell phone or something.
And it's very green because it's wind power, so it all fits in with the environment and the climate.
Well, you can't help it in England when they serve beans with your full English, and you have mushy peas with your fish and chips. I'll tell you, there's a lot of reason why people want to go outdoors a lot.
I was going to say, you want to take a lot of long country walks. You don't want to offend your host.
And then we have for the modern generation, Oasis or Blur.
Oasis. Manchester City fans, Liam and Noel Gallagher, and great music.
Oh, yeah. I mean, that's a no-brainer for you, isn't it, David? No-brainer.
Absolutely.
And then we have, this is Darren Woodhead's question. Do you prefer the version of I Will Always Love You as sang by Whitney Houston or Dolly Parton?
Whitney Houston.
The backstory behind that is when Whitney Houston got into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, I was pretty cheesed off about it. Cheesed off. Because I just don't think that she belongs in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. And then apparently Darren is a massive Whitney fan. He has posters on his wall and, framed CDs and everything. So,
listen, Whitney's a great songstress, but I'd go along with what she's quite doing in rock and roll. I do not know, but she's a great songstress, but she's no rocker.
Well, I mean, here's the thing: is to me, she's just like a really good karaoke singer because she sings she sings good. She did not write any of her songs through her entire career. She wrote 10 songs that were actually on an album. She was the last writer listed on all 10 of those, and none of them were hit singles. She didn't write. She didn't play instruments. She was just an overblown karaoke singer.
So everybody, so all people who like Whitney Houston, and you have concerns about Phil's comments, please take it up with him. These are not the opinions.
At Aki Rising on Twitter, that's at ACCYRISING on Twitter.
Is that the Whitney Houston fan club coming over the horizon? They're not in lockdown. They've broken lockdown to come and get you.
Well, you know when it's lockdown is getting too long when we have a 5-minute segment on Whitney Houston.
Well, I think it's maybe time to turn our attention to the Tractor Boys.
Yep.
Oh,
so you guys both happened to attend the same match that involved the Tractor Boys earlier this year, didn't you?
Yeah, I mean, how we managed not to bump into each other, I really don't know, Tony.
Well, we might have, but we probably didn't realize it because I'd like to listen to your experience of that match, because I mean, I've been there several times, and I'm always interested to get somebody that's coming to the club fairly new to explain your game day experience.
And we do have a great photo of David and Peter together at the Ipswich match.
Well, we went global, did Peter and I and the guys around us, because the game was a lunchtime kickoff. I think it was 12 noon.
Right.
It was live on Sky. And I remember that Stanley were not having the best of times in the league, and Ipswich rolled into town, unbeaten league leaders. So Stanley were very much the underdogs. Game was being live on Sky and beamed out over the world. 2-0 up at half time, deservedly so, Stanley. They saw the game out. Stanley had a player sent off, so did Ipswich. And the guy sat next to me, and I'm sorry, I don't know his name, but he's got a very dry wit. At the start of the game, he said, I'll take a draw. I'll take a 0-0. I said, okay, fine. Yeah, okay, makes sense. So 1-0 up, 2-0 up, half time. I'd still take a 2-2 draw. I thought, okay, if that's the way you feel about it. But when you get to the 85th minute and he's still insisting you take the 2-2 draw, you begin to think, come on, guy, lighten up a little bit. You know, you've got a win in the bag here. And then he turned to me, he said, we've just been on the TV. I said, how do you know that? He said, I've just had a text from my sister in Australia who's just spotted us on the TV. So we were being beamed into households in Australia with Stanley 2-0 up and coming in on a great victory. And this guy was still insisting he'd take the 2-2 draw. I thought he was so funny. But it was a good game, very competitive. And the 2 games I've been at the WHAM Stadium, what I love about it and what is totally different from the Etihad is that you are so close to the action. You know, you hear and almost feel every tackle. You're so close to the game, and it's so refreshing. And I wouldn't give up City, but I do love my trips to Stanley. And that was a great game. It was a great win for Stanley, 2-0. Really buoyed the spirits, helped, you know, the club go up a couple of places in the league. And I can honestly say, every time I've watched Stanley, they've never lost. So I have told Andy and Peter that I am available for hire if required to preserve that unbeaten run.
Well, I got to say that match too was, one of the best ones I saw during my last trip over. Not only because they beat Ipswich, who hadn't, as you said, hadn't lost going into that match, but the fight was on television. And I think, from a crowd perspective, I think they had about 3,500 people, which is not a sellout, but because Ipswich, I mean, the distance they'd have to travel, and of course it was a 12 o'clock kickoff. But the big fact, it was available on Sky, and I think that, but still the atmosphere. And like you said, not only can you can reach out and touch the place, you can smell the grass, you can smell the mud, you can smell the players almost. You can hear the language coming out of their mouths. I mean, it's the experience. It's the atmosphere just adds to the overall experience.
You said in there a couple of things that actually are a great way to bring in something that I wanted to talk about next. So we actually had Olivier and Denosian from Accrington, France, on the show about a week ago, and they told the story of the first time that they came to England to watch football. That among the places they visited, one was the Etihad, and then they also came to WHAM Stadium. And after that trip, they came away as Accrington fans, and they cited exactly what you said of being close to the action, smelling what's on the field, smelling the grass, just that intimate atmosphere as being the reason that they chose Accrington over Man City or any of the bigger teams that they visited. And I think that's really the appeal, is that, for a lot of folks, they just want to see the Premier League and the big time and the best players of the world. And, I watch the Premier League on TV. There's nothing wrong with that. But for folks that really want that intimacy of being able to come to a match and almost be able to reach out and touch a player, Accrington just gives that in a way that's completely unique.
Absolutely, and what also struck me was, again, it's the warmth of the welcome that Accrington give to away fans, because Accrington are one of the few, if not the only, I don't know, but they don't have a police presence at games because it's not required.
Yeah,
it's part of Andy's ethos. He's made people so welcome. He doesn't see it as, oh, they're the away fans. They are customers. I mean, this guy, he runs his business very successfully. He knows the importance of customer care and a great customer experience. And I know that he will sometimes give fans a free pint or a free pie. And I know that on the proverbial cold and wet and windy or snowy night in Accrington on a Tuesday night or something, if the away fans are on the coffee stand and they are perishing in the conditions,
right,
they happily move them into the seated area under cover, because there's not going to be any trouble. And it's his, not just his generosity of spirit, it's just indicative of the man that he wants to give people the best experience that he can. He doesn't want the opposition to go away with any points, but he wants their fans to have a great experience without letting them take away, as I say, the spoils on the day. And it's just such a warm atmosphere, and you could see the Ipswich and the Stanley fans mingling, not a hint of trouble, plenty of tribal passion when the game got underway, but nothing untoward between the fan sets. And that comes from treating people correctly, and that's what Andy and Accrington Stanley strive to do every game.
The one comment I'd go back to, David, when you mentioned about that gentleman saying that he would take a 2-2 draw late in the match. I mean, I've run into that as well at the stadium and talking to people. I think it's like, people think, well, we're little Accrington Stanley. We're playing against a team that was not long ago in the Premier League, and are we supposed to be here? And let's not get everybody upset. Let's just take a point and let them go away happy, and we'll be happy. And it's that small club mentality when, I think it takes a while for the fans to accept, say, hey, we belong here. We are a League One team, but they don't want to upset people.
Well, there is that, but I think it's also it's a nice reflection on the support base that they are self-effacing. They've got that wry sense of humour and self-deprecating humour where you can laugh at yourselves. And I think if you can laugh at yourselves, that's always the measure of somebody having a good sense of humour. So I think it's probably a marriage of all of those aspects that you've mentioned, I've mentioned, but it just makes for a really nice atmosphere. And if I can just change it just for a moment with Manchester City, obviously it's, the worlds apart with Accrington in the modern day. But up until Sheikh Mansour came in and the investment from Abu Dhabi, we had a phrase which was typical City, which is that City were always capable of snatching defeat from the jaws of victory.
Yeah.
It was almost in our DNA.
Right.
Typical City.
Yeah.
Generations of City fans, and that's all typical City. So we've all been there, and it was only 21 years ago. City were in the third tier of the English football. They were where Accrington are now. So, okay, it's worlds apart in terms of finance. There's 4,500 miles difference between Abu Dhabi and Accrington. But to some degree, City fans have known a little bit of what Accrington, fans go through, albeit we're in different sort of satellites now, different orbits.
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's actually a good time to speak of City here, because there was a couple things I wanted to ask you about, and I will tell you that one of the highlights of the show since we've been doing it was having Podge Almond on 2 days before he scored against you in the FA Cup. that aside, there are a couple things like I told you in my email. If you go back and listen to past episodes, there may have been times where I said that I wasn't really a fan of oil money in football because I felt that it skewed the playing field. But in terms of looking at COVID-19 and you look at clubs like I'm going to signal out a club that we said we wouldn't mention by name, so we'll just call it the Devil, and then also Liverpool and Arsenal, and I singled them out because they are all clubs that are owned by American sports conglomerates, basically. Individuals like Stan Kroenke and the Glazers and the Red Sox group who made their money off of American sports and then went and invested in the Premier League. Certainly, I felt like maybe this was a more sporting way of doing things to make your money off of sports than to make your money off of oil. But then, if you just look at the way that the COVID-19 has been handled, really, Man City to me is the one team that has not made any missteps in the way that they've handled the treatment of their employees and not trying to take government money and things like that. So I just wanted to take a moment to really applaud Man City for that.
Well, that's very kind of you, Phil. It's we're in the middle of this coronavirus pandemic. To some degree, I mean, football just pales into insignificance when you compare and contrast with the thousands of people who are dying and the tens of thousands of people who are suffering, first responders who have earned all of our admiration because they're putting their lives on the line to help others. And it does put football as a whole into context. And you've got, over here in England, we've got the National Health Service, and we applaud our National Health Service and our care workers and our frontline workers at Thursday night, 8 o'clock every night. And you just wonder, I mean, we all appreciate football and the football demigods that the icons, but the real heroes in society are some of those who are amongst the most poorly paid and certainly amongst the bravest among us. But in terms of what Manchester City's contribution has been, it's indirectly associated to City, but the NHS Nightingale hospitals in England, they've been specially set up to deal with the COVID-19 patients and try and make sure the health service isn't overrun. But the Abu Dhabi National Exhibitions Company, they own the Excel Centre in London, converted into a Nightingale hospital, and that's all been free of charge. City have given up the Etihad Stadium for NHS purposes, for training or for whatever they require. And then you've got a tragedy that really hits home. Pep Guardiola gave €1 million to fight the coronavirus in Spain. And then tragically, his mum died from COVID-19 about a fortnight ago in a hospital in Barcelona. So that's a tragedy that will, obviously hit home hard to Pep and his family and the City fan base. But on a more upbeat note, City paid all their casual workers up until the end of the season, notwithstanding the fact those games may not even take place. And they were quick to do that. Contributed to local food banks. And City run a charity called City in the Community. And the City workers have been ringing the elderly season ticket holders on a regular basis to check in with them, make sure they're okay. They may not have families, so do they need any shopping doing and that type of thing. So this isn't a PR exercise for City, it's what they've done, and it's heartwarming. And there are other clubs obviously doing this sort of thing. And at this juncture, it's probably appropriate to mention, going back to Andy Holt, that the very, very first sort of inklings of COVID-19, when it started to become a major issue in England, Andy has to have been the first club owner to say to supporters, if you're nervous about attending games, this is before the whole cancelled.
He offered
that. I will refund your season tickets for the remainder of the season, so you're not out of pocket. And when you consider this is coming from Accrington Stanley, who are far from being the richest club in the world, that was a tremendous gesture. And I think it's one which puts it into stark contrast when you look at what's emerging in England today, that there seems to be a plan from the Premier League, come hell or high water. They want to finish their season, and there are rumours going around that they want to restart it in June, which, without getting too political, I think is quite an affront to people who are in the midst of the pandemic, that they're contemplating football. And let's face it, footballers are not immune from COVID-19. And it puts footballers and their families and the managers and the referees, puts them into an invidious position. Do they really want to be playing football when we've still got thousands of people dying around the world and there's no sign of a vaccine?
I think that the precedence now has already been set by Netherlands and France and Belgium. I just think that once those dominoes have fallen, that the rest of the league should kind of fall into place with that. But like you said, it just seems like come hell or high water, they want to get those games in. But kind of turning away from the negative, and one positive that we did also want to make sure we mention in terms of Andy Holt, is he also turned his production at WHAM towards, I think they made 50,000 masks for the NHS as well. So I mean that's something else that Andy has done to help out, not directly from Accrington Stanley, but from his personal business, as he's actually used his manufacturing to make masks that were much needed for healthcare workers.
And also, the draw that David mentioned that they're doing on a weekly basis to raise money for the Memorial Gardens. They're donating a portion of that to the Heinburn Hub, which is collect funds for the needy in that area. So even raising money for a project, they're still willing to turn over some of those proceeds to a well worth cause. So that's another measure of the club and the men.
David, now one thing that I don't know if you know the answer to this. It was something I had mentioned in my email, but I had always kind of wondered about, and it was something that I had made sure to give City credit for when it happened last season. But there was a donation of goalposts from City to Accrington last year. Do you know anything about how that came about?
Well, I think City have got a bit of an affinity with other smaller clubs in the northwest of England. And I know these goalposts, they were donated to Stanley a year ago, May 2019, because Andy tweeted about it and he thanked City for the gesture. I think they were valued at something like £1,000. And it was nice to see my club helping Stanley. But what I am surprised about, with it being a goal and net, when you consider that you've got the likes of Sergio Aguero, Raheem Sterling, Gabriel Jesus, I'm surprised those nets weren't worn out because we score so many goals.
Well, that's excellent. The City. So City, I'm guessing, probably does some things like that for other northern teams too. It sounds like that.
Possibly, but this is certainly one which we all know about. And yeah, I was pleased that my club were able to do a little bit of something for Stanley. And you never know, with those goals, they're being so well used, maybe the ball will just automatically fly in there and it'll bear fruit for Stanley.
Well, it can't hurt.
The ball knows the ball knows where to go.
You've got something there. Maybe the nets are well worn in. The onion has been put in the bag plenty of times. That's my favorite term there.
Well, one of the things that maybe would be nice to see is down the road in the preseason is to have Pep and his team come over to WHAM Stadium for a preseason match and reacquaint themselves with their own nets.
Or not reacquaint themselves with their own nets. I mean, after what Stanley did to Marseille, I mean, City might have to, worry about coming in there getting beat.
Well, wouldn't it be a joyous occasion if we were all in the stadium as well? Because it would mean we've got some degree of normality back in our lives.
That's the biggest thing. Is I think that we just miss being able to be out there with our friends and that camaraderie. And I think as much as the sport happening on the pitch, I think it's just a matter of there's people that are close friends of mine that I really only see during football season out at the games, and you just miss being able to have a pint with those guys.
And that brings it back to Accrington and Andy, because it's all about community. And of course, the WHAM Stadium is that congregation point, maybe, every second Saturday or, midweek. It's one of the main factors in Accrington that bonds and brings the people together as one. And that is obviously one of the reasons why the proposition for Andy back in 2015 was so appealing. It wouldn't have been appealing financially and from a hard-nosed business perspective, but this guy sees the community and sees the value in the community. And the sooner we can get the WHAM Stadium back with 2,500, 3,000, 4,000 people in there, the better.
Yeah, for a club that really does for, like what you say, average attendance compared to other League One clubs, and the job that they do with that amount of money coming in and the product they put on the field, it's all round team effort from Peter and what he does with the fan experience and the commercial department. They do an outstanding job organizing before and after match entertainment. Just the overall experience. And I do believe they won an award for away travel for people, the overall experience. But it is, people go now to WHAM Stadium, and it's not just for 90 minutes of football. You go there at 1 o'clock until 6 o'clock, you're going to be entertained before, on the pitch, and then afterwards. It's just a really good all-day experience.
Couldn't agree more. That's been totally what I found. It's a great place to go. It just is. I mean, I'm not blowing smoke up people's backsides because I'm on a Stanley podcast. It is a wonderful experience. Whilst I'm just on about this, can I ask you guys, do you know of the times that City have ever played Stanley throughout history? Because I did a bit of research and I could only ever find one game where we played against each other. Do you know of any others? I've got one dating back to 1937 in January, and it was the FA Cup. I think it was the fourth round, and City beat Stanley 2-0. But other than that, I've been unable to find any other games where we've gone head-to-head.
From what I've found, at least with most of the current Premier League teams, that it's similar to that, where maybe there will be an FA Cup match in the 30s, But ultimately, I mean, Stanley, the first incarnation of Stanley, primarily played in the third and the fourth division. The modern Stanley never made it into the Football League at all until 2005, and of course played in League Two and up until 2 seasons ago. So most Premier League teams, I believe that. They played Stanley has played Chelsea one time in their history. I know they've never played Arsenal. I don't believe they've ever played Spurs. So there's just very little history of Stanley ever playing any of the current Premier League teams.
Well, I think in the late 50s, I think it was an FA Cup match. They played at Anfield and lost 2-0 to Liverpool. I do know that, but I don't recall, and Darren Woodhead would be the gentleman to answer this question, if they played City other than that one time. But If they did, it's before my time anyway. So, but
sorry, Tony, you weren't around in 1937 then.
no,
Okay.
Well, it's funny because when I go back in the fall and go into into the lounge and the people will say, "Oh, you're back again." It's not like, "Hello, are you good to see you?" It's, "Oh, you're back again." So I take that as I'm accepted now as part of the furniture, which is not a bad thing.
Absolutely, but of course, in recent times, under Andy's watch, you have beaten Burnley in the League Cup. That was a Premier League team at the time.
Yes.
And then you lost to West Ham 1-0 in the London Stadium in the next round. That was the League Cup. And that same season, you went to Middlesbrough, who were in the Premier League, and lost 1-0 in the FA Cup fourth round. So you're absolutely right, guys. With Stanley's league existence being in tiers 3 and 4, it would be broadly restricted to cup games, wouldn't it?
One of the things that you mentioned about the Burnley match, and this is another shout out to Peter, because I when I was a young lad, I was a season ticket holder at Burnley, and when they had that match after one of the fundraisers, I think it might have been for the screen, they had a print made up of Sean Dyche, John Coleman, the winning goal, and it's signed by I think 4 individuals altogether. He made a point of getting that arranged for me after I got the winning bid, and this was after some of the players had left. So he ended up getting Matty Pearson to sign that in a coffee shop in London to put the thing together because I won the winning bid. So that's some things that Peter does behind the scenes that doesn't really get recognized.
On top of everything else, Peter is the one who arranged this interview as well, and it got us into contact with you, David. We're getting close to an hour and a half here, so we don't want to take up your whole entire day. We had gotten everything that I had written on my list covered, but what else did you have that you wanted to make sure we talked about before we finish up here?
Well, just to finish off with, I think we'll both agree that 2017-18 was a great year. That was Accrington as League Two champions, and it was City as the first ever Centurions with 100 points in the Premier League. And the way the Premier League's going at the moment, maybe Liverpool will be awarded it, but hopefully, if it is curtailed, they won't surpass our 100 points total. So maybe we can keep hold of that one. And obviously, we want to see Accrington climbing the leagues. I know the main thing with Stanley, from Andy's perspective, is sustainability, making sure Stanley is there forevermore for the community, because you've got so many clubs now. They're gambling, and the stakes are so high. You can pour so much money in it, but if you miss the boat, then you've crippled your club. And I think we can both rest assured that City and Stanley are both in very capable hands. And I'm always wishing when the cup draws are made that it's going to be Stanley and City either at the Etihad or the WHAM. And I just hope to goodness that one day that'll happen and we can all enjoy the experience.
Absolutely.
That would be amazing and fantastically said. And I think that, like you said, I mean, there's so many clubs out there gambling. And I know that Andy Holt's main goal is sustainability. And of course, we'd love to see Stanley in the championship or even eventually the Premier League. But like we say all the time, every year that Stanley stays in League One for the time being, that's like winning a World Cup for us. And, we just want to keep that going. But David, I really, really appreciate you coming on the show today. And, we really enjoyed your time. And, once again, make sure that everybody is going to READ, but never RED.com to check out David's articles. And you can also find him on Twitter at DJWSkyBLU, and follow him on Twitter. Lots of funny stuff and football stuff that you put out on social media. It's been a great time chatting with you here today, David, and you have a great rest of your day, and also stay safe and healthy, and hopefully we can all be back at a football stadium and having a pint together soon.
And I just want to add that I want to thank David for the time today. It's been a great visit, a great chat, and all the best to you with all the things that you do and with City. And hopefully we'll see you one day at the WHAM Stadium.
It's been a pleasure, gentlemen. Really, thank you for having me on, and totally reciprocate. Let's everybody stay safe. Let's come through this, and one day let's get back to enjoying our football. Thank you very much.
Cheers.
Well, thank you. Cheers.